Shalom, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Unleash Your Potential with Rabbi Yisroel Juskowicz. I'd also like to thank our co-sponsors for today's program, Beth El in Phoenix, and welcome Wendy Rosoff to introduce today's guest speaker.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here and co-support another wonderful event with Valley Beit Midrash. I have the great pleasure of introducing our speaker today, Rabbi Yisroel Juskowicz. He's a noted artist, musician, author, and speaker. He's performed to Jews across the country of all walks of life and ages, and is best known for his warm, engaging style and inspirational messages. He's produced 3 CDs of his own soulful music, has drawn commissioned artwork, and has 3 best-selling books on Jewish topics, which drew widespread critical praise. Yisrael received his bachelor's in Talmudic law from Ner Yisrael, and later a Smichat Chaver degree from RIETS at Yeshiva University. Yisrael also is a licensed physical therapist and a certified life coach, and focuses on people overcoming their obstacles and reaching their potential. He received smicha through Machon Smicha, a Chabad-based program. He has 2 beautiful children who are the pride and joy of his life. And Yisrael lives with his wife and family in Baltimore, Maryland. Rabbi?
All right. Thank you so much. It is wonderful to be here. Before I even get to what I was going to talk about, I want to just give a big thank you to Wendy over here from Beth El of Phoenix, and Reb Shmuley, Alex Kramer, of course. Thank you so much for hosting me. Reb Shmuley, I've been kind of a secret admirer of you for many years. Every time I go online, I see you're just involved in something else incredibly special. Donating kidney, I can't even keep up. The kidney donation, adopting a child, and all of the tremendous amounts of work that you do, especially when it comes to social activism. So I really admire you. I appreciate a lot of your Torah learning. I've listened to many of your classes, and thank you again for hosting me. So the topic I'm going to talk about today is, I would consider to be the most topic that I'm the most passionate about. And I'm going to bring up the slides over here in just a minute. I'm going to kind of start from the beginning. This topic, I feel like, is so fundamental to who we are. I mean, I can't think of a topic that's more important than this. All of us, we only live once, and all of us want to reach our potential in life. All of us want to become the greatest version of ourselves. So always the question is how? What can we do to reach the potential within ourselves? And is there really a pathway that's given in the Torah that teaches us how? What does the Torah have to say about potential? And we're not only going to focus on Torah, we're going to focus on some secular sources as well, because I believe that the Torah is obsessed with potential. It is all about potential. A lot of people think it's just sort of a book of laws, but there's so much more to the Torah, as you will see in this lecture. So I want to share just a little bit about me first. Let me see if I can get this. Okay, who am I? Why should you listen to me? Well, first of all, Wendy, thank you so much for giving me the introduction. I want to say, before I just talk a little bit about some of the things that I've done, that I take no credit. God has given me so much. I always say God has given me so much, and He only takes 10%. What we call Meiser. He, He gave me gifts, and all I'm just doing is trying to utilize what He gave me. I really take no credit for it. And the reason why I'm going to talk a little bit about myself first before I get into the actual topic is because I kind of want everyone to know that I am someone who tries, always striving to reach my potential. Of course, I'm still a work in progress like everyone else, but thank God I have been privileged to accomplish different things. So, expressing and fulfilling my Jewish creativity, I would say that's my passion in life. To me, this is like my oxygen. I wake up in the morning and I'm just how can I express myself creatively, and especially to do it in a Jewish way. But even more so is using it to make a greater impact on the world. That's what I feel is my purpose. We're going to get a little bit into purpose as well, besides just potential. God gave us gifts, and it's all up to us how we use those gifts. With every force in the world, there's a positive energy that we can use it for, and then there's a negative, a destructive energy. We hold the tools. We have the power to make it in either direction. So that's just that. She mentioned I'm a rabbi. I'm an artist. I've been doing commissioned work for many years, oil paintings mostly, but I do some in pastel as well. Um, Musician and an author, and I'm actually going to move myself a little bit out of the way over here. A public speaker. I've been lately, that's become sort of my new passion is going out and sharing ideas with the world, and it's been a real privilege to be able to do this recently. I'm a certified life coach. I've been coaching some people over the years, and finally, I have not quit my day job yet. I am a licensed physical therapist. As Wendy mentioned, because um, you know, I have a Jewish mother who's always saying, never quit your day job unless you know you really can. So I still practice. I mostly work with little children and try to help children with developmental delays. So that's sort of it. This is a painting that I did. I'm just going to kind of show a few some different things that I've done. This is a painting actually I did called "Fixing the World." There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that says this is actually done in pastel. Um, that the world stands on three pillars. It stands on Torah, tefillah, prayer, and gemilas chasadim, acts of kindness. So I wanted to sort of make a painting that I felt incorporated all three of these messages into it. So that was a painting I did. It was commissioned and it's hung up at an Isha Torah in Washington, D.C. This is an oil painting I did. I'm just showing because this was one that I had a little bit of more pride in because it's difficult to get the gold coloring, but a family who got a chance to hold and touch the Stanley Cup, and they were very excited. So this was an oil painting I did. These are two of the books I've written. I've actually now written 4 or 5 books, but these are two of my most well-known books. And I would say The Hidden Path is really the one that I'm sort of the most passionate about. A lot of the ideas that I'm going to share is going to be from this book. This is really my heart and soul. And it received a lot of great reviews from a lot of very well-known people in the Jewish world. And I only hope that the book can continue to reach, the four corners of the world and make a big difference to the world. I recently actually wrote a children's book as well. Let's see. I have other books as well. I have, a book about converts to Judaism and some other books. But after October 7th, I felt that there was a certain void in the world especially after the war started. I feel like Israel, unfortunately, was being portrayed in really difficult ways in a lot of the media, and I felt there was a certain amount of ignorance that was going out there, and I wanted to have a book written more in simplistic terms that children, tweens really mostly can appreciate and understand our history, our significance of the state of Israel, and even some of the moral issues that unfortunately has come up in regarding the state. So the book actually became a bestseller on Amazon, in part because Amazon at first banned me from advertising for the book. They felt it was too charged or whatever. Eventually, they kind of got around to letting me advertise for the book. But the book is actually written pretty simply. As I said, it's a children's book. And, I will say, by the way, one thing about why I wrote the book is because when there's a certain void in the world, it's in Pirkei Avos, it says that in Pirkei Avot, it says that when there's makom she'ein ish, when there's no person, no man in the world, hishtadel liyos ish, strive to be a man. And it doesn't literally mean man. I've always believed it meant to be a leader. In a place where there's a void in the world, something that needs fixing, that needs to get out there, it's up to us to go out and fix it, to do it. So I felt that there was a certain need for this type of book in the world that wasn't being seen, and so I decided to put it out there. Right. These are a couple of my music albums. I'm going to get to the main stuff in just a minute. One of the greatest privileges I've written many songs. I have 3 different albums out there, but one of the greatest privileges I had was to work with C. Lansbaum, a very famous guitarist on many of the tracks, and he won a Grammy Award. He's an incredible person, and it really helped to take the music to a different level. Oh, last thing, I'm sorry. So I have a weight loss course. called Toward Your Healthy Self. This is me and my own personal journey. I lost about 40 pounds in about 4 months. And weight loss is actually a parable, I feel, for potential in so many ways because it's something that so many of us struggle with. But I always say that when you're losing weight, it's not so much about how much you lose, but about how much you gain. It can help you become a greater person, a more disciplined person, and to help you reach your potential, you have more energy. So I came up with this course. It's on Udemy. A secular version of the course is on Udemy, but the Jewish version that I kind of like a little bit more is actually up on my website. I'll have a link for the website at the end of the course. All right, enough about me. Let's get into the topic. What is potential? What is greatness? So everyone has different definitions of what is considered greatness. I can only say what I've learned from myself. When I was a little kid, I was a dreamer. I still am a dreamer. I always feel like when you stop dreaming, you stop being alive. Dreams are what gives us motivation to succeed in life. But of course, it's what we dream about that makes us into who we are. So, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a superhero when I was a really little kid, and I envisioned myself flying over buildings and saving people. And as I got a little older, I got into other types of visions of greatness. I went through the basketball stage, and I thought maybe I'll one day be an NBA basketball player. Not very realistic for a nice Jewish boy. And then I continued to other things. I had a friend of mine who was very wealthy. I used to go visit him, and I'll never forget, his father had a convertible, and he used to sit there. We used to go inside of his convertible and we'd press that button over and over again, the one that goes up and down with the roof. And we would all it was so much fun to us. And, then I started, his father did not like it very much, I should say. But I went through that stage where I thought, having the most money, that's the measuring stick. But as I got older and I really fell in love with Judaism, I felt that, and creativity as well, I felt that there's a type of greatness which is much greater than all of those. And that, of course, I feel is spiritual greatness. This is real greatness that's not only limited by the physical world. God gave us so many gifts. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is the dichotomy of man. We're all born with so many different different traits. There's an old story. I think this is a good place to start. A girl goes to her mother first and says, "Mommy, where did we come from?" And the mother says, "I'll tell you, we come from the greatest stock of all time. If you go back thousands of years, we had the great Moshe, who brought us through up till Sinai, took us out of Egypt. You go back even before that, we have the great fathers and mothers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, the great mothers. And you go back even before that, and we come from Adam Harishon, the first man who was endowed with a unique godly soul." And she says, "Wow, we have, as we say, yichus, such yichus. We come from such wonderful stock, so to speak." And then she goes to her father and she says, "Abba, Daddy, where do we come from?" And he said, "Well, I'll tell you. Millions of years ago, we were originally cavemen living in caves. You go back a little bit before that, and we're Neanderthals, just unable to communicate. And then if you go back millions of years before that, we were just apes, just running through the jungle, swinging from the vines, eating bananas." And she doesn't know what it means. So she goes back to her mother and she says, "Mommy, you told me that we come from such incredible stock. We come from Adam Arishon, the first man with a unique soul. God, our father says that we come from apes. So which one is it?" So the mother said to her, "Both statements are true. Just I was talking about my side of the family, and he was talking about his side of the family." All right. I kind of wish there was a laugh track on Zoom, but in the reality of this, both statements are true. Right at the beginning of the Torah, it says you're fashioned from the dust of the earth. There's a part of us that is just very physical, that did maybe come from apes. And then there's that part of us, God breathed inside of us a neshima, a soul, a godly soul within us. So the question is, which side do we make stronger? We have this dichotomy within us. I always say which side will become stronger? The side that you decide to feed more, because we both have this side of us. One of the importance I just want to mention about having both sides is that it does bring a certain amount of humility as well. Every human, we want to reach and soar for the sky. We want to have our greatness. We want to reach our potential in life. But sometimes understanding that we are just flesh and blood, it puts us sort of back into our place, that we are just humble. We are just flesh and blood as well. There's a great phrase from Reb Simcha Bunim of Peshischa, one of the great Hasidic masters. He used to have in one pocket the phrase from the Talmud, Bishvi li nivra ha'olam, because of me the world was created. And in his other pocket, he had the words, Anochi Afer ve'efer. We say it in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur davening, I am but dust and ashes. There is that sense that we have this dichotomy within us. We have this dichotomy within us. I actually added the slide at the very end, Psalm 8. I always feel that anything in the world you want to know, it comes from David HaMelech. King David, he lived and breathed. He lived life on so many different levels with so many different experiences. And that's why I always feel whenever you want to learn or find something, you can look in Psalms. There's a psalm for just about everything. King David was the mighty warrior, the great king, the greatest king we probably ever had, and he was a poet, and he wrote poetry, and he was a musician as well. He played the harp, but at the same time he had struggles, within his own family, his own son that rebelled against him. His sin with Bathsheba. He struggled himself. He had a child who passed away. You know, I always feel, King David always speaks to me. So I have this quote from Psalms, because I feel like this psalm says exactly the dichotomy that we have. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you're mindful of them? Human beings that you care for them? We're nothing. We're like a little speck in the sky, so to speak. I just have a message that just came up. Can people still hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, good. But look at the next words. It says, yet you have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. You have made them rulers over the works of your hands. You put everything under their feet, all flocks and herds and the animals of the wild, the birds in the sky, the fish in the sea, all that swim the paths of the seas. God has made us king, mastery over the world. So we have this dichotomy within us. I was reading that, if we were to look at just our galaxy alone, we would be like one little speck of dust in Grand Central Station. Everything from the outside screams to us that we're just nothing, we're insignificant. But if we look at ourselves from the inside looking out, everything changes. From the inside looking out, everything inside of ourselves says, I matter. God cares about me. God wants me to fulfill his will. God wants me to reach my potential. God wants me to make an impact on the world. It's all about how we look at ourselves. Let's go to the next one. So what's the Torah's view on potential? So I'm going to get a little bit more deeply into things. There's the sin of the spies, and I always feel that there's so much you could learn from the story of the sin of the spies. It started off as a reconnaissance mission that they wanted to. It sort of, I think, started off with noble intentions. They wanted to scout out the land of Israel. Unfortunately, it evolved into something much worse, and they ended up disparaging the land of Israel. But the words that they used when they went inside and they saw the giant people that were there, and they said, we can't overcome this. They said, we are like grasshoppers in our eyes. Those are the words that they used, in our eyes. The Kutzker Rebbe jumps on that. He says that it should have said, we're like grasshoppers in their eyes. Actually, the next words are, and we are like grasshoppers in their eyes as well. But it says in our eyes first. Why? The Kutzker Rebbe, Reb Nachman Mendel of Kutz, says because they viewed themselves as like grasshoppers, and therefore as just nothing, as small, and therefore to them it just seemed so insurmountable. The answer is really understanding and remembering how much God believes in us, how much God believes in us. You know, We wake up every morning, the first words, one of the first words that we say, Modeh ani lefanecha, shechazarta bi nishmasi b'chemla rabba emunasecha. God, we thank you for restoring our souls with great mercy and kindness, emunascha, and your faith. It doesn't say our faith. It says your faith in us. That's what makes us special, is to remember that God's believes in us. I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about Moses and what his problem was, but what his originally what his downfall was. But God basically was saying to him that I believe in you. There's a parable that I always love to say, the elephant story. I don't know if anyone over here has ever heard this before, but apparently elephants are they can carry thousands of pounds, as we know. But at the end of the day, the owner of the elephant ties it to a little peg in the ground, and the elephant just stays there the whole night. He doesn't get out from that peg. How could this be? He's so strong. So what happens when the elephant is a little baby, just when he's born? The owner ties him to this little peg in the ground, and he realizes, he says, I can't get out of this. So he spends his entire life thinking, I cannot get out of this. I can't get out of this peg in the ground. So even when he gets much bigger and can carry thousands of pounds, he stays tied to that peg in the ground. There actually was an incident in Barnum and Bailey Circus. This is, I think, in the early 1900s, where there was a fire by the circus, and actually some of the elephants then started running, because that's what they do when there's a fire. And after that, the peg in the ground didn't work for them anymore, because they realized it was just a peg, and I could have gotten past that all my life. Unfortunately, I think some people are tied to our own pegs in the ground. But always remember, it's just a peg. We're all elephants. We're much stronger than that. All right, let me go to the next slide. All right, I want to share one of my favorite stories from a woman named about a woman named Laura Schultz. This is in the 1970s. I think it was in 1977. This was one of the more well-documented stories. There was a little boy stuck under a car, a Buick, I believe it was, and she went ahead and picked up the front of the car an inch or two, whatever it was, to be able to have the kid be able to get out from underneath. Now, that kind of story we've probably all heard at different points, but what made this story even more incredible was that this woman was the 63-year-old grandmother of that little child. It was a 63-year-old grandmother who did that. So the story made a big local sensation at the time, and this one reporter went to go interview her, and she didn't want to get interviewed. And he kept saying, why? How come? He finally got an interview with her, and he said to her, why? How come you didn't want to get interviewed? And she said to him, because my entire life I thought I can't do anything. There's so many things I wanted to do. And this made me confront myself that there was so much more that I could do. And this reporter happened to also be a life coach. I'm a little bit biased because I'm a certified life coach on the side. And he said, let me help you then reach your potential. What's something you want to do? And she said she always was fascinated by rocks. She said, I was always fascinated by rocks. I always wanted to study gemology, which I believe is the study of rocks. So he said, let's do it. And he coached her, and she got a college degree in that subject. And she ended up teaching at a university in her 70s, became a college professor because she saw how much she can accomplish. She became a university professor in her 70s. Let's go to the next one. I always throw in Hasidus. I always feel very connected to the words of Hasidus. And I just want to look at the time because I want to make sure I'm doing okay. Good. We have plenty of time. So Rabbi Nachman has this beautiful parable, and this kind of fits into everything that we're saying. I always love Rabbi Nachman. He's known for his parables, his stories. He was the great grandson of the great Baal Shem Tov. And he says, someone had this dream, and in this dream, he saw this beautiful treasure. The treasure was buried under a bridge somewhere far away. And he travels all the way, a distant land. He gets to this bridge. Finally, that was in his dream, and he's so excited. He'd spent so much time getting to that bridge. And standing over there is a guard at the bridge. And he asks the guard says to him, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "I had this dream last night that there was a treasure buried right underneath this bridge." And the guard says to him, "It's funny. I had this dream that someone would come here today and there's really a treasure buried in his own backyard." So he goes back home, starts to dig, and sure enough, the treasure is in his own backyard. It's a beautiful parable because, a lot of people, and I'm talking to myself too, sometimes we think we have to go so far to seek greatness. We have to go to some lecture, we have to go to some guru, whoever it might be, but really it's already inside of ourselves. The treasure is already there. We just have to tap into it. So one of my greatest instances, what I feel when we talk about potential, was Abraham. You know, we all know he was given 10 tests. And the last of the 10 tests, of course, was the hardest of all, which is the story of the Akedah, when he was asked by God to sacrifice the son that he loved so much, the son that he waited so long to have. I mean, I can never imagine the level of test that was, but he wanted to do God's will. He wanted so badly to do God's will. So he went to the mountain, Mount Moriah, which of course is where, the holiest place in Judaism, where the temple was eventually built. He went to that mountain and he tied down his son to the altar. And the son said, "Daddy, what are you doing?" And he said, this is what God wants me to do. And he raised the knife. He was about to do it. He really was going to go through with it. And we all know the stories that the angel stopped him at the very last moment. What's incredible is what the angel said to him. He said, "Avraham, Avraham." Abraham, Abraham. He said his name twice. Now, I want to share with you something so incredible. And if you hear this message well, it has the ability to make a tremendous impact on your life. The Medrash says, why was his name repeated twice? So he says, because in heaven there was the ideal Avraham, the potential, the highest level Avraham. And down here is the earthly Avraham. At that moment, the Medrash says the Avraham here on earth reached the exact same level as the Avraham above. He had reached his ultimate potential. He had fulfilled his destiny. He had reached the highest level of greatness that he could. And God said to him, "Now you're ready to start the Jewish people. Now I will make you the father of the chosen people." He had reached his potential. Let's go to the next one. I talked a little bit about Moses before. Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, he came from very humble beginnings to a certain extent too, because we all know when God talked to him at the burning bush, he didn't want to become a leader. He said, the words were, "Anochi aras sfasayim," I have a burdening of the lips. He had a stutter. He couldn't talk. He says, who am I to be a leader? I can't even get the words. I have no charisma. How am I going to motivate people? So God said to him, "I believe in you." What we talked about before. Emunascha, God's faith in us. I believe in you. You can do this. And what happened at the end of the Torah? The words are, no Navi come ki Yisrael can Moshe. No other prophet will ever be like Moshe. He became the greatest leader the Jewish people ever had. So the Torah begins and ends with potential. It starts off with Abraham's potential, and it ends with Moshe's potential being fulfilled, both of them being fulfilled. Such incredible ideas. Let's go to the next one. So I want to share some ideas about ways that have helped me to try to reach my potential in life. And the first one I want to share is Rabbi Nachman. As I mentioned before, I like to quote some ideas from him. He gives a parable about the human soul. So a lot of his stories involves a king, a princess, a prince. So this one has a king and a prince. This prince had wandered away from the king's palace. He went exploring, so to speak, went on an adventure. And the adventure, of course, lasted for months and eventually even years. And the king and the prince completely forgot who he was. And the king missed his son. So the king kept sending officers to try to convince the son that he was a prince. And he wasn't interested. He says, "No, I'm not. I'm just a commoner." And he kept sending, more and more messengers. You're a prince. You're the son of a king. And he said, "No, I'm just a commoner." finally, this one wise man said, let me go find him. And he came to the prince with this really big, long telescope. And he said, I want you to look through this telescope. And he had the telescope pointed to his room in the palace, the room that he grew up in. And when Rabbi Nachman saw, I'm sorry, when the prince saw his room that he grew up in, he remembered who he was. The parable is that inside of every one of us is our room in the palace. That's our soul, our neshama. You know, God has given us that special room that's always been inside of us. You know, sometimes we need a telescope to remember back who we were, so to speak, but it is always there. Let's go to the next one. You know, I like to quote this idea because it's also along the same topic. Michelangelo, you know, someone once asked him, how did he build such beautiful sculptures? How did he carve? I mean, if you look at them, they were just a rock. You know, it was just a big solid rock. Like, how were you able to create something so beautiful just from a solid rock? And he said this incredible insight, and I believe it's everything that we're talking about. He said, when I look at a rock, I don't see a rock. I already see the beautiful statue inside of it. All I'm doing is carving away the little pieces around that rock to get to the beautiful statue that's already inside of it. Great parable for the soul. I'm always a big believer, you know, wherever you find wisdom, it's good to share them, whether it's from a Jewish Torah source or from a non-Jewish source. As I already talked about God's faith in us. So I want to share a different idea, it's a slightly different approach to reaching our potential. I kind of hinted to this a little bit when I talked about the book that I wrote, the Israel book. So I don't usually like to share Holocaust stories. They're kind of depressing. Usually we'll only share them if it's Yom HaShoah or Tisha B'Av. You know, we have Tisha B'Av coming up. But I want to share this story because I think the message of this story is so powerful. The positive message of the story. The story is about the Blujever Rebbe who is in one of the concentration camps. And the Nazis did one of these very cruel games. You know, the Nazis were known for their cruel games. They built this giant pit. And they said anyone who jumps across this pit will live. And if they don't jump across this pit will become their grave. You know, one by one, it was almost an impossible jump, even for like an Olympic athlete on a good day. You know, these people were starving and beaten, and you know, most of them, one by one, were dropping like flies into the pit, and that became their grave. The Blujever Rebbe was standing next to this one, a secular Jew that he had become friends with in the camp, and this Jew said to him, you know, why even go through the ritual of trying to jump? You know, why give the Nazis their fun? Let's just lie down in the pit, and this will be our grave. You know, why even go through the motion? And the Blujever Rebbe said to him, you know, as long as there's breath inside of me, I'm going to try my best to live. So the Blujever Rebbe took the biggest leap of his life, and believe it or not, he made it onto the other side. And then the secular Jew who was with him also made the jump, and he landed on the other side. So the secular Jew asked the Blujever Rebbe, what were you thinking when you made that jump? So he said, I wasn't holding on to myself. I was holding on to the coattails of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. I was holding on to our great forefathers that we came from, and they're the ones who carried me over the pit. And then he asked the secular Jew, what were you thinking when you made that leap? And he said, I was imagining I was holding onto your coattails. See, the story, this is, by the way, in Yafa Eliach's book, this famous woman, she wrote a famous book called Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust, one of my most favorite books. The message of that story is so powerful that when we launch onto something, when we latch onto something much greater than ourselves, then the sky is the limit. We can go so much further if we remember that we're a part of something so much bigger than ourselves. You know, there's a great line from the Alter of Slobodka. I always love this line. Laptar Slobodka lived about, was it, I think in the late 1800s, or maybe, I'm sorry, I think he was in the early 1900s. And he accomplished some incredible things. In his later years in life, he opened up yeshivas, religious schools all across Europe, and he was old, and someone asked him, how did you do this? I mean, fundraising alone, it's not like he, took a course in fundraising, didn't exactly have a 501c3 tax deductible donation service. Yeah, how did he do this? So he said this incredible line. He says that I never asked myself whether or not I could do this. I only asked myself whether or not it needs to be done. That's an incredible line because sometimes when we only think of it ourselves, and a lot of our insecurities can come in, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. But when we think about the bigger picture, what needs to be done for the world? What sort of tikkun olam do we need to make? What impact can we make on this world? When we make it about something much greater than ourselves, then the sky is the limit. Let's go to the next slide. What else can we do? So one thing I think that's always very important is to appreciate your own uniqueness. There's an old line that Reb Zusha used to say that when God, at the end of my life, he's not going to ask me, why didn't you become, Reb Zusha was another great Hasidic master. Why didn't you become like Moses? Why didn't you become like Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest teacher we ever had? He will ask me, why didn't you become Reb Zusha? We each have our own uniqueness. There's a line of, don't try to be like someone else because everyone else is already taken. God has given us the tools. There's a parable in the Talmud. The Talmud says that God's greatness, so to speak, if we mint coins, every coin looks the same. But when God mints coins, each one of us are different, not just physically, but inside too. Each one of us are given different strengths. We all have such unique strengths. There's a beautiful parable I love to say from Rabbi Akiva Tatz, a great teacher from Jerusalem. He used to use the parable of a construction site. He said, imagine you come to a construction site and you don't know what to do. What am I doing at this construction site? And you look suddenly down at the floor and you see you have a toolbox. And inside of your toolbox is a wrench, a hammer, and nails. And then you look at the guy next to you and he has his toolbox and it's things to make cement. And then I don't know, my Jewish education, I don't know that much about how to build a building, but I'm just imagining the person next to him had pipes and things to make pipes, the pipe work, and the person next to him had different things to make wood for wood, and the person next to him had a drill. All of them, each one had a different tool. The parable is each one of us has a different toolbox. But our mission is all the same, to make that construction site as beautiful as possible, to make the world into a beautiful place. That's the mission that God gave us. Let's go to the next one. So part of the secret is to step out of your comfort zone. This was a struggle for me actually when I wrote the children's book a little bit because I'd never written a children's book before. But God always wants us to step out of our comfort zone. There's a great saying that life begins at the end of your comfort zone. That's really when life starts. The greatest things that we have in the world, sometimes we're given them without an instruction booklet. We're given children and it's like, figure it out, but of course that's what gives us the greatest sense of growth. It's just that there's so much that can happen when you step out of your comfort zone. We could either choose to be, I like to say, mediocre and stay in our comfort zone, or we could be uncomfortably great. And I think it's so much better for the world and for ourselves to be a little bit uncomfortably great, because something, once we reach that level, we start to realize that our comfort zone, we weren't even that comfortable in it after all. We realized that there was so much more to life than just that. Rabbi the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to say about Mount Sinai. If you look in the verses in the Torah, he used to say that the verse says that God asked us to go michutz lamachane, outside of the camp, to go to Mount Sinai. Like, God could speak to anyone anywhere. Why did he want them michutz lamachane, to go outside of the camp? What was the significance of that? So the Rebbe says, that a camp, when those that word machaneh, it's a reference to your comfort zone, your what you're used to, your home, so to speak. But to have a relationship with God, sometimes it means you have to go a little bit out of your comfort zone. God wants us to go out of our comfort zone. That's what helps us to reach our greatness. Let's go to the next one. I always think, you can always tie in something to some sports analogy if you try hard enough. I think every rabbi tries to look always for some type of sports analogy at some point in their sermons. So I'll throw in one of mine. It's some of the lessons we can learn. In my opinion, the greatest basketball player that ever lived was Michael Jordan. I'm sorry if there's any LeBron James fans out there. I still think Michael Jordan is king. So, how did Michael Jordan become Michael Jordan? We all know the story. He was cut from his high school basketball team. So he said two things that stood out in my mind, and I think both of them are actually relevant to what we're talking about right over here. The first one, he says that he never compared himself to anyone else. He only compared himself to himself. Can I become greater than I was yesterday? And if the answer was yes, then he worked on himself. He didn't say, "Oh, why can't I be like this guy or that guy?" He only compared himself to himself. And the other one, which I think is even more powerful, is that the other insight that he said is, when he was in 10th grade, I think it was 10th grade, right when he was cut from his high school basketball team, there was a kid in his class, I think his name was Leroy Smith, who was 6'7" in 10th grade. I can't even begin to imagine that. And nobody would play him basketball anymore. No one would have a one-on-one. He would challenge everyone to a one-on-one, but no one would play him because he would beat everyone. It was like a joke. He would just beat everyone in his class. And Michael said, I'm going to try. He didn't have his growth spurt yet. He wasn't so tall. And he said, I'm going to play him. And what happened when he played Leroy Smith? He lost. And then he said, I'm going to play you again tomorrow. And he played him again. And he lost again. And I'm going to play you again. And he played him again. And he played him again. And he played again. And then one day, he beat Leroy Smith. And he became Michael Jordan. Because he realized, I have to go out of my comfort zone. My comfort zone is, I'm not even going to play that guy. He's too good. But when he decided to go out of his comfort zone, that's when greatness came. It's all about appreciating the journey. Life is a journey, as we like to say. And the secret I feel to reaching potential a little bit is to sort of learn to appreciate the journey. As I mentioned before, I'm an artist, and there's an expression in the world of art that art is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And there's a lot of truth to that saying. So much of life is difficulty, is pain, but when you come to appreciate the journey, that's when it becomes much easier. I remember a story of someone who's climbing a mountain. I don't know if this is a story or if it's just a parable. Someone who's climbing a mountain. It's one of these really there's a frozen ice cap at the top of the mountain, and he's freezing, and he's climbing and climbing, and he's getting near closer to the top. And this helicopter drives by the mountain, and he sees him, and he says, "Hey, hop in. I'll give you a ride to the top of the mountain." And the guy says to him, "You don't understand. I don't want to get to the top of the mountain. I want to climb to the top of the mountain. I want to learn to appreciate the journey to get there." So a lot of it is about finding your own purpose. Mark Twain, I like to always say some of my opinion, one of his most inspiring words was that he used to say that there's two most important days in your life. The first is the day that you were born, and the second one is the day you figure out why. We all have our unique purposes. I don't want to try to be like him. I don't want to try to be like her. I want to be myself. I want to reach inside of myself and figure out my own purpose. Use what God gave me specifically to try to fulfill my purpose. So another important I'm getting near the end over here, is to find a mentor for yourself. I think that everyone in the world needs a mentor. Moses, the greatest teacher in the world, it says, Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai. He accepted the Torah from Sinai. He had the greatest teacher in the world. He had God himself, so to speak, who taught him. But everyone, and that says in Masr Yeshua, he gave it over to Yeshua, to Joshua. Everyone needs a teacher. Everyone, I feel, needs a mentor in life. Shlomo Carlebach used to say that a teacher is not just someone who gives you information. A teacher is someone who connects you to heaven in the deepest way. Someone who understands you, someone who wants to connect you to God. There's so much more. When I say teacher, I really mean mentor. All of the greatest leaders, even in the secular world as well, had mentors. The CEO of Google he had a certified life coach who taught him, and he said he couldn't have become the CEO of Google unless he had that life coach. Tony Robbins, the greatest, probably considered to be the greatest motivational speaker today. He had someone named Jim Rohn who taught him, another motivational speaker. Bill Clinton actually said that Tony Robbins was his mentor, so to speak, to become reaching his potential. Everyone needs a teacher. In Pirkei Avot, it says, make for yourselves a teacher. Aseh l'charav. I always thought that phrase was important. It doesn't say find a teacher for yourself. Make for yourself a teacher. A teacher can help make you into the greatest person you can be, help you become the greatest version of yourself. Everyone, I think, needs a teacher. So it doesn't have to be, I'm a certified life coach. This is not a plug for me. It could be me if you want, but it really could be anyone. It could be someone in your personal life, a friend, a family member, someone you look up to, someone who understands you. It could be a rabbi, some sort of teacher, but everyone needs a teacher to help reach a level of greatness. The last thing I want to just say before I think we close off is actually I have like one more slide too, is to learn how to be present in the moment. I brought up Abraham, the first Jew. And the first words when I brought up the Akedah, I talked about the Akedah and how he said Avraham. The first words that he said back to the angel, to God actually, he said, Hineni, here I am. He was fully present in the moment. Hineni, here I am. One of the secrets I feel to greatness is to learn to be fully present in the moment. Right now, I'm doing this. I will put my energy into this fully. I will turn off my cell phone. I will turn off any distraction, any noise in the background. I will engage in this. There was a story about the Balatanya, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe. Unfortunately, he was framed by what's called a Misnagid, the people who opposed the Hasidic movement at the time. Someone sort of snitched on him to the Russian Tsar and made up some sort of story or crime that he did. It wasn't true. And the Tsar sent soldiers to arrest him. The Balatanya actually spent a little while in prison where he actually wrote the Tanya. And when the soldiers were coming to get him, this is incredible. He was writing a letter to his son. And when one of his students, one of his Hasidim walked in on him, he said he saw him fully immersed in writing a letter to his son. He was telling his son how much he loved him and how hard it will be when he goes to prison. And he'll always be in his thoughts and his prayers, and he can't wait one day he'll be able to see him again. He was pouring out his heart and soul into writing the letter. And the Chassid said to him, they're coming to arrest you. They're going to be here in a half an hour. Like, aren't you terrified? And the Balatanya said to him, that's in a half an hour from now. But right now I'm writing a letter to my son, and that's all that matters in the world. So it's all about learning to be present in the moment. When we learn how to be present in the moment, the sky is the limit, I feel, of how much we can accomplish. There's a great quote I want to end with this from Marianne Williamson, the self-help guru. She says, you are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve God in the world. There's nothing enlightening about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were born to manifest the glory of God that is within us. We don't need to play small. God wants us. God knows we're so much bigger than that. God knows we're so much bigger than that. I think I want to end over here. I've just put up a meditation online called The Living Soul. It's on my YouTube channel. I think everyone here will get these slides. And this meditation actually is specifically designed for this class because a lot of the ideas that I shared are in this class. And here, finally, let me just see. Here's just some links to, I gave my personal email. If anyone just wants to send me an email, stay in touch, stay in touch about anything. One of the songs that I wrote, it's on this slide over here, was called Fixing the World, L'Taken Olam, actually. And I put out it came to me, the melody came to me on the 8th night of Hanukkah. And I put out this version of this song with images that had to do with the incredible amount of unity that the Jewish people felt um, after October 7th. So I ask if everyone wants to check out that. Like I said, I have the links over here. I have a YouTube channel where I give weekly parshiot, little short snippets called the Inspired Parsha. I share usually one Torah idea and one of the Hasidic, something from a Hasidic Rebbe about that week's Torah portion. So here's some links. There's some links to a couple of my books. And like I said, stay in touch. I love to hear from all of you. And thank you again so much for listening to me. I want to just say one last thing. And I meant to say this in the very beginning, but I forgot. I want to dedicate this class to my brother of blessed memory, um, Ephraim Meir um, Ben Hadassah. Unfortunately, I lost my brother a few years ago. He was my best friend, and every time, whenever I share words, I try to say it in his memory because I always feel like I feel his comforting hand on my shoulder, encouraging me to keep going on with this. So that's it. I just wanted to end off with that dedication. And again, thank you so much for listening. I think we have a few more minutes if anyone here has questions. Maybe 5 more minutes. Anyone?
Yeah, thank you so much, Rabbi Juskowitz. We'd love to open it up if anyone has a question or a comment. Please feel free to raise your hands or you can write things in the chat as well.
Well, I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
So, do you have any tips on how to keep the spiritual in front all the time when the physical is so challenging? And especially in the world today, it almost seems like the world is trying to keep down the spiritual life. But even in our personal stuff, I know that's kind of hard for me to try and keep focused on spirituality versus that whole physical part. Do you have any tips you can share?
That's an excellent question. I will say that that is probably one of the most challenging aspects in the world, really, for everyone. I always like to say, when people say, "Oh, I can't do this. I'm stuck in traffic. I have bills to pay," and I just, everyone has struggles. Welcome to the human race. And it is very true. We live in a very physical world. Um, I think that everyone needs to find their own way to connect to God. God, one of the greatness of, let's say, the Torah, for example, is that I always feel there's something in there for everyone. There's parts that are more intellectual, there's parts that's more spiritual, emotional, there are parts that are poetic. There's parts to the spiritual world that I think speaks to everyone. And I think one of the keys can be is to try to find what speaks to you. It could be a powerful song, a melody. It could be, um, listening to an inspiring speaker. We're all human and we're all going to have moments when we don't feel connected spiritually. But I think that, one of the great things about the internet these days is that there's an endless amount of resources out there. There's also many challenges online too, but there's an endless amount of resources out there to find. So sometimes, there's an expression of, even if you don't feel it, sometimes you do it anyways because you'll start to feel it. And it's kind of true, sometimes, oh, I remember just, I'm sorry if I'm going a little bit off topic, but Rebbetzin Youngreis, the great, Holocaust survivor who started that famous organization, Hineni, she once said she was asked by a little girl, "Where does your smile start from? Does it start from here?" And she pointed to her lips, or does it start from here? She pointed to her heart. And she told the girl, "Sometimes it starts from here, from my heart, but sometimes it only starts from here, meaning my lips. Sometimes it's a shallow smile. I don't really mean it. I'm not feeling it. I'm feeling weighed down by the physical world. But whenever I do start that smile from here, eventually it does trickle down into my heart as well and becomes a smile from my heart as well." So I think that, you can try to fake it till you make it a little bit, as I was saying, or find a resource, something online that speaks to you. And everyone has their own unique way, I feel, of connecting to God and connecting to Judaism, connecting to spirituality in general. I hope that helps. Thank you so much for listening. I was a little bit of this is thank you actually for being my guinea pig actually because I've never given a Zoom class online before. I've usually give my classes live. So thank you. I'm wearing my Zoom outfit, which is nice clothes on top and pajama bottoms on the bottom. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you for spending the time, to hear some words of spirituality and wishing everyone the best of luck. And again, I have my email here, so you can definitely stay in touch. Okay.
Thank you so
All right.
much. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone, for joining. Thank you all again, and enjoy the rest of your day.